Marcus Chen wiped the grease from his hands and looked at the broken air filter he had just fixed. It was the third one this week. The aliens who ran the ship never seemed to understand that human equipment needed care, not just replacement when it broke. The research vessel Convergence was huge, almost like a floating city in space. It belonged to the Zephyrians, a race of tall aliens with bodies that looked like they were made of blue crystal. They thought they were better than everyone else, especially humans. Marcus had been working on the ship for 2 years now. He fixed things that broke, cleaned the systems that kept everyone alive, and did all the jobs that the Zephyrians thought were beneath them. They paid him barely enough to survive, but it was better than being stuck on Earth with no future. The door to the maintenance bay slid open with a sharp hiss. 3 Zephyrians walked in, their crystal bodies catching the light and throwing blue reflections on the walls. Marcus recognized the one in front, Commander Vextar, the ship's second in command. His crystal face never showed emotion, but Marcus had learned to read the slight changes in the color of his skin. Right now, Vextar looked pleased about something, which usually meant bad news for someone else. "Human," Vextar said in his cold, ringing voice. "You will come with us." Marcus set down his tools. "What for?" "I've got 3 more systems to check before my shift ends." "Your shift is over. The captain wishes to see you." This was strange. In 2 years, Marcus had never been called to see Captain Jelkes. The Zephyrian captain was known throughout the ship as someone who barely acknowledged that other species existed, let alone spoke to them. Marcus followed the 3 aliens through the ship's corridors. Other crew members, mostly Zephyrians with a few other alien species mixed in, stopped to stare as they passed. Word traveled fast on a ship, and everyone could tell that something unusual was happening. The captain's quarters were on the top deck of the ship, in a section that Marcus had never seen before. The walls were covered in crystal formations that pulsed with soft light, and the air smelled like ozone and something metallic that made his nose itch. Captain Jelkes sat behind a desk made from a single piece of black crystal. She was larger than most Zephyrians, and her body had a deeper blue color that spoke of age and authority. When she looked at Marcus, her eyes glowed like cold stars. "Human maintenance worker Marcus Chen," she said, reading from a datapad. 2 years of service. Adequate performance ratings. No family connections or significant relationships among the crew. "That's me," Marcus said, wondering where this was going. The captain touched her datapad, and a holographic display appeared in the air between them. It showed a planet, brown and gray, with massive storms swirling across its surface. The image looked dead and hostile. "This is Kepler 442c, the captain said. "Our long-range sensors have detected unusual energy readings from this world. Very strong readings, unlike anything in our databases." Marcus studied the planet. It looked like the kind of place where nothing could live. "What kind of energy readings?" "That is what we need to find out. The planet's surface is extremely dangerous. Acid storms, unstable gravity fields, and radiation levels that would kill most life forms within hours. Our equipment suggests there might be something valuable down there, but we cannot risk sending valuable crew members to investigate." The words hit Marcus like a cold wave. Valuable crew members. He understood now why he was here. "You want me to go down there?" he said. "Yes. You will take a shuttle and land on the planet. You will locate the source of the energy readings and report back to us. We have prepared basic survival equipment and a communication device." Marcus looked at the spinning planet in the hologram. Even from space, it looked like a death trap. "What makes you think I can survive down there if your people can't?" Commander Vextar made a sound that might have been laughter. "Humans are surprisingly resilient. Your species survived on a hostile world for thousands of years before developing space travel. You adapt to harsh conditions better than most civilized races." The word stung, but Marcus had heard worse from the Zephyrians. They always talked about humans like they were barely intelligent animals that had somehow learned to use tools. "And if I refuse?" Marcus asked. Captain Jelkes's eyes grew brighter. "Then you will be dropped off at the nearest trading station with no pay and no references. I doubt you would find work on another ship after that." Marcus knew she was right. Space jobs were hard to come by for humans, especially ones without connections or money. If he was blacklisted by the Zephyrians, he would probably end up working in some mining colony for the rest of his life. "How long do I have to think about it?" "No time. The shuttle is being prepared now. You leave in 1 hour." The captain dismissed him with a wave of her hand. As Marcus walked back through the corridors with his escort, He could hear Zephyrians talking in their musical language. He caught enough words to understand that they were making bets. Bets on how long he would survive on the planet's surface. Some thought he would die in the landing. Others gave him a few hours before the environment killed him. The most optimistic bet was that he might last a full day. Marcus went to his small quarters and packed the few personal items he owned. A picture of his sister back on Earth, a small toolkit that had belonged to his father, a book of poetry that he read when he couldn't sleep. Everything else belonged to the ship. At the shuttle bay, he found a small beat-up transport ship waiting for him. It was old and looked like it had seen better decades. Next to it was a pile of equipment, a basic survival suit, some food packets, a water recycler, and a communication device that looked like it had been repaired many times. "This is it?" Marcus asked the Zephyrian technician who was loading the supplies. "More than enough for what you need to do," the alien replied without looking at him. Marcus put on the survival suit and climbed into the shuttle. The controls were simple enough. He had trained on similar ships during his basic space certification. The engine started with a rough growl that didn't sound healthy. As the shuttle bay doors opened, Marcus could see the brown planet hanging in space ahead of him. Somewhere down there was whatever was creating those energy readings. Whether he would live to find it was another question entirely. He started the shuttle's descent toward the planet's surface. Behind him, on the convergence, he knew the Zephyrians were watching and waiting to see how long the expendable human would last. Marcus gripped the controls tighter and flew toward his possible death, wondering if he would ever see the stars again. The shuttle shook like it was going to fall apart as Marcus flew through the planet's atmosphere. Warning lights flashed on the control panel, and the engines made grinding noises that definitely weren't normal. The storm clouds outside were thick and dark, with lightning that was the wrong color, purple and green instead of white. Marcus fought with the controls as acid rain started hitting the shuttle's hull. The metal began to smoke where the drops touched it. His survival suit's air recycler was already working hard to filter out the toxic fumes that were somehow getting inside the cabin. Come on," he muttered, trying to find a safe place to land. The ground below was a mess of broken metal and strange formations that looked like they had been melted and reformed many times. The shuttle's left engine died with a loud bang. Marcus had about 30 seconds to find somewhere to crash land before the whole ship came apart. He spotted what looked like a flat area between two huge metal structures and aimed for it. The landing was rough. The shuttle bounced twice, skidded across the metal ground, and slammed into a pile of debris. Marcus was thrown against his safety straps hard enough to see stars. When everything stopped moving, he sat still for a moment, checking to make sure nothing was broken. Outside, the acid storm was getting worse. Through the cracked cockpit window, Marcus could see the rain eating away at anything it touched. The shuttle's hull was already developing holes. He had maybe an hour before the whole thing dissolved. Marcus grabbed his supplies and put on his helmet. The survival suit felt flimsy against the hostile environment outside, but it was all he had. He opened the shuttle door and stepped onto the surface of Kepler 442c. The first thing that hit him was the scale of everything. The metal structures around him weren't buildings. They were massive, stretching up into the storm clouds like mountains. As his eyes adjusted to the strange light, Marcus realized he was looking at the remains of a city. But it was a city built for beings much larger than humans. The smallest doorway he could see was at least 50 feet tall. Broken vehicles littered the streets, each one the size of a Earth City block. Everything was made from the same dark metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Marcus checked his scanner. The energy readings were stronger here, coming from somewhere deeper in the city. He would have to find shelter from the acid rain and make his way toward the source. He ran toward the nearest building, his boots splashing through puddles of acid that ate at the metal ground. The entrance was like a huge cave mouth, big enough for ships to fly through. Inside, the air was cleaner, though it still smelled of metal and something else, something organic that had been dead for a very long time. The walls were covered in strange patterns that might have been writing or decoration. In some places, there were what looked like pictures carved into the metal. They showed tall, thin figures with 4 arms and elongated heads. The beings in the pictures seemed to be doing different activities, working with machines, looking at the stars, caring for smaller creatures that might have been children or pets. Marcus turned on his flashlight and walked deeper into the building. His footsteps echoed in the vast space. Every now and then he would find piles of bones, huge skeletons that confirmed the size of whatever race had built this place. They had been dead for a very long time. The energy readings on his scanner kept getting stronger as he moved through the city. Whatever was creating them was still active, still working after all these years. Marcus began to feel like he was being watched, though he couldn't see anything moving in the shadows. After an hour of walking, he found himself in what might have been the city center. Here the buildings were even larger, and many of them had strange growths covering their surfaces. The growths looked almost biological, like metal plants or artificial coral. They pulsed with a faint light that matched the rhythm of a slow heartbeat. Marcus was studying one of these growths when he heard something move behind him. He spun around, his light cutting through the darkness. For a moment he saw nothing. Then he heard it again. A scraping sound like something large dragging across metal. He started moving faster, following his scanner toward the source of the energy readings. The scraping sound followed him, always staying just out of sight. Whatever was making it was big and seemed to be tracking him through the ruins. Marcus reached a part of the city where the buildings were different. These structures looked more organic, with curved walls and surfaces that seemed to flow like frozen water. His scanner showed that the energy source was close now, maybe just a few hundred yards away. The scraping sound was getting closer. Marcus broke into a run, his heart pounding inside his chest. He could hear heavy breathing behind him now, and the sound of something large moving through the debris. He turned a corner and found himself facing a dead end. The building in front of him had a small opening near the ground. Small by the standards of this place, but still big enough for Marcus to squeeze through. He dove through the gap just as something massive crashed into the wall behind him. Marcus rolled across the floor and found himself in a circular room filled with broken equipment. Large pods lined the walls, most of them cracked open and empty. But the energy readings were incredibly strong here. Whatever he was looking for was in this room. Outside, the creature that had been chasing him was trying to get through the opening. Marcus could see part of it in his flashlight beam. Black scales the size of dinner plates and claws that scraped against the metal floor. The opening was too small for it to fit through, but it kept trying. Marcus moved deeper into the room, his scanner beeping faster and faster. At the far end, he found a pod that was still intact. Unlike the others, this one was glowing with the same pulsing light as the growths outside. Through the transparent surface, he could see something moving inside. The scanner's readings went crazy when he got close to the pod. This was definitely the source of the energy the ship had detected. But as Marcus looked closer at what was inside the pod, he realized this wasn't just some piece of alien technology. It was alive. The creature in the pod was huge. Even curled up, it was larger than Marcus's shuttle. Its scales were black like the ones outside, but they seemed to absorb and reflect light in patterns that almost looked like stars. As Marcus watched, the creature's eyes opened. They were golden, bright as molten metal, and they looked right at him with an intelligence that was unmistakable. This wasn't just an animal. It was thinking, aware, and it had been waiting. The pod's surface began to crack, glowing lines spreading across its surface like a spider web. Whatever had kept the creature asleep for so long was failing. Marcus stepped back as the pod split open, releasing a wave of warm air that smelled like ozone and growing things. The creature inside began to move, unfolding itself as it woke up from what might have been centuries of sleep. Marcus stood frozen, watching as something that had been old when the city was young opened its golden eyes and looked at the first living being it had seen in ages. Outside, the scraping sounds had stopped. The storm was getting worse, and Marcus realized he was trapped in this room with a creature the size of a small building that was just beginning to wake up. The creature pulled itself out of the broken pod with movements that were surprisingly graceful for something so large. Marcus pressed himself against the wall, trying to make himself as small as possible. The golden eyes followed his every movement, but there was no anger in them. Instead, Marcus saw something that looked almost like curiosity. The creature stood up slowly, its head nearly touching the high ceiling. Up close, Marcus could see that its scales weren't just black. They had patterns of silver and deep blue that shifted and moved like oil on water. When it moved, the patterns flowed across its body in waves that were almost hypnotic. Marcus expected the creature to attack him, or at least to be afraid of him. Instead, it did something completely unexpected. It sat down, lowering its massive head until it was at Marcus's eye level, and made a soft sound that was almost like a purr. "Okay," Marcus said quietly, his voice shaking. "You're not what I expected." The creature tilted its head at the sound of his voice, the same way a dog might when trying to understand something new. Its golden eyes were bright with intelligence, and Marcus could see it studying him just as carefully as he was studying it. Slowly, Marcus raised his hand. The creature watched the movement but didn't pull away. When Marcus moved his hand closer, the creature stretched out what looked like a finger, though it was longer than Marcus's entire arm, and gently touched his glove. The moment they made contact, Marcus felt something strange. It was like a warm feeling in the back of his mind, a sense of recognition that didn't make any logical sense. The creature made another soft sound, this one definitely pleased. "You've been alone for a long time, haven't you?" Marcus said. The creature's eyes seemed to dim slightly, and it pulled its hand back. Even without words, Marcus could sense the loneliness that radiated from the massive being. It had been sleeping in that pod while its entire civilization died around it. Marcus looked around the room at all the broken pods. "Were there others like you? Your family?" The creature followed his gaze and made a sound that was unmistakably sad. It walked over to one of the broken pods and placed its hand on the cracked surface. The meaning was clear. There had been others, but they were gone now. "I'm sorry," Marcus said. "I know what it's like to be alone." The creature looked back at him, and Marcus felt that strange connection again. Somehow it understood what he was saying, even though they didn't share a language. Over the next few hours, Marcus explored the room while the creature watched him with patient interest. He found broken pieces of technology that looked incredibly advanced, even by the standards of the species he knew. Some of the devices seemed to be made from the same material as the creature's scales, as if they were grown rather than built. Marcus picked up what looked like a communication device and examined it. The creature made an interested sound and moved closer, looking at the device in Marcus's hands. When it touched the device with one claw, the dead machinery suddenly came to life, glowing with the same golden light as the creature's eyes. "You can make it work," Marcus said, amazed. "You're connected to their technology somehow." The creature seemed to understand. It picked up other broken devices, and one by one they began to function again. Soon the room was filled with softly glowing machines that hummed with gentle energy. Marcus found what he hoped was a translation device among the working equipment. It was a small crystal that fit in his palm, connected to a larger machine by threads of light. When he held it up, the creature nodded and touched the crystal with its finger. The effect was immediate. Marcus could suddenly sense emotions and simple concepts from the creature. Not words exactly, but feelings and images that formed meaning in his mind. The creature was young despite its size. It had been put in the pod to keep it safe when some great disaster threatened its people. It had expected to sleep for a short time and wake up to find its family waiting. Instead, it had slept for thousands of years. Marcus shared his own story through the connection. He showed the creature images of Earth, of his life working on the ship, of the Zephyrians who had sent him here to die. The creature's anger at this last part was so strong that it made the room's lights flicker. But when Marcus shared memories of the beautiful things he had seen, the stars between galaxies, the way Earth looked from space, the satisfaction of fixing something that was broken, the creature's mood lifted. It shared its own memories in return. Marcus saw images of the planet when it was alive, vast cities full of beings like the creature, but smaller and more varied. He saw art and music and science beyond anything he could imagine. The creature's people had been builders and explorers, traveling between the stars and creating wonders wherever they went. They called themselves the architects, and they had been peaceful. Too peaceful, perhaps. When the destroyers came, machines from another galaxy that consumed everything they touched, the architects had tried to negotiate rather than fight. By the time they realized their mistake, it was too late. The creature showed Marcus how his people had put their youngest and most gifted individuals into stasis pods, hoping they would survive until the destroyers moved on. But the destroyers had been thorough. When the creature finally woke up, it was the last of its kind. Marcus felt tears on his face as he experienced the creature's grief and loneliness. But he also felt something else, a determination to help this being that had lost everything. "You don't have to be alone anymore," Marcus said out loud. "I don't know much about anything and I'm probably going to die on this planet, but you don't have to face it by yourself." The creature's emotions shifted to something Marcus recognized as gratitude. It moved closer and very gently touched Marcus's shoulder with one massive hand. The gesture was so careful, so aware of how fragile Marcus was compared to it, that it brought fresh tears to his eyes. Marcus decided to call the creature Titan after the giants from Earth's old stories. When he shared the name through their connection, Titan seemed pleased. It shared its own name in return, a complex sound and feeling that Marcus's human throat couldn't make, but which felt warm and strong in his mind. Together, they worked to repair more of the ancient technology. Marcus's engineering skills, combined with Titan's innate understanding of architect science, proved to be a powerful combination. They fixed environmental controls that cleaned the air and provided warmth. They activated defenses that kept the acid storms from getting into the building. Most importantly, they found the control systems for the ancient spaceships. The architects had built vessels that were part machine and part living organism, ships that could grow and adapt to their passengers' needs. Most of them had died with their creators, but there was one ship left in the deep vaults beneath the city. It was small by architect standards, but still large enough to carry both Marcus and Titan. As they worked together to wake the ship up, Marcus realized that the Zephyrians had been wrong about him. They had sent him here to die, expecting him to be just another disposable human. Instead, he had found something that would change everything. He had found a friend who could remake the galaxy, and who had chosen to trust the small, fragile human, who had shown him kindness in his darkest hour. The architect ship was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. It looked more grown than built, with smooth curves and surfaces that seemed to flow like liquid metal. When Titan touched the ship's hull, it responded by opening doorways and extending walkways that adjusted themselves to fit both a human and a being of Titan's size. The inside of the ship was even more amazing. The walls glowed with soft light that seemed to come from within the material itself. Chairs and control surfaces grew from the floor when they were needed, then melted back when they weren't. The ship was alive in a way that made Marcus feel like he was inside some vast, gentle creature. Titan connected with the ship systems the same way he had with the other architect technology. As soon as he touched the main control surface, the entire ship hummed to life. Lights flowed along the walls in patterns that looked like rivers of stars, and Marcus could feel the ship's engines powering up deep in its hull. "It's been asleep like you were," Marcus said, watching the ship wake up around them. Titan shared an emotion through their connection that felt like homecoming. This ship remembered him, had been waiting for him to return. As the ship's systems came online, Marcus saw displays showing star charts and navigation data. The ship knew where they were and where they needed to go. The launch from the planet's surface was smooth and quiet. Marcus had expected the violent shaking and noise of a normal rocket launch, but the architect ship simply lifted off the ground as if gravity had stopped affecting it. Through the transparent sections of the hull, Marcus watched the dead city fall away beneath them. As they broke through the planet's atmosphere, Marcus saw the Convergence hanging in space exactly where he had left it. The research vessel looked small and crude compared to the flowing beauty of the architect ship, but it was still the only home Marcus had known for the past 2 years. "I have to warn you," Marcus told Titan as they approached the larger ship. "The people up there aren't going to be happy to see us. They sent me down to that planet expecting me to die." Titan's response came as a wave of protective anger that made the ship's lights flicker. Marcus could feel his friend's desire to defend him, but he also sensed Titan's confusion about why anyone would want to hurt someone who had shown them kindness. "They think humans are less important than they are," Marcus explained. "They think we're just tools to be used and thrown away." The concept was so alien to Titan's understanding that Marcus had to share specific memories to make him understand. When Titan finally grasped what the Zephyrians had done, his anger was like a cold fire that burned without flame. The communication system on the Convergence was buzzing with activity as they got closer. Marcus could hear the confusion and alarm in the Zephyrian voices as they tried to figure out what the strange ship was and where it had come from. "Unknown vessel. This is the research ship Convergence," came Captain Jelkes's voice over the radio. "Identify yourself and state your intentions," Marcus activated the architect ship's communication system. Convergence, this is Marcus Chen returning from Kepler 442c. I found what was causing those energy readings. The silence that followed lasted for nearly a full minute. When the captain's voice came back, it was tight with disbelief. Impossible. The human Chen was sent to the surface 3 days ago. Our calculations showed that he could not have survived more than a few hours in that environment. Well, your calculations were wrong, Marcus said. I'm requesting permission to dock. Another long pause. Then Commander Vextar's voice cut in. What is that ship you're flying? It doesn't match any design in our databases. Marcus looked at Titan, who was listening to the conversation with growing understanding of the situation. It belongs to my friend. He's coming aboard with me, friend. The captain's voice was sharp now. Explain. You'll see when we dock. The Convergence's docking bay was barely large enough to hold the architect ship. As the bay doors closed and atmosphere was restored, Marcus could see Zephyrian security teams taking positions around the ship. They were armed and ready for trouble. They're scared, Marcus told Titan. They don't know what to expect. Titan's response was a feeling of amusement mixed with disdain. Through their connection, Marcus could sense that Titan was evaluating the Zephyrian technology and finding it primitive and limited. The ship's doorway opened, and Marcus stepped out first. The security team's weapons were all pointed at him, but their crystal faces showed confusion when they saw that he was alone and apparently unharmed. Captain Jelkes strode into the docking bay, flanked by her senior officers. Her blue crystalline features were set in an expression of cold anger. How did you survive on that planet, human? And where did you acquire this vessel? I told you it belongs to my friend. Marcus stepped aside as Titan emerged from the ship. The effect on the Zephyrians was immediate and dramatic. Several of the security team members dropped their weapons in shock. Commander Vextar took 3 steps backward before stopping. Captain Jelkes's crystalline skin went pale, shifting from deep blue to almost white. Titan stood in the doorway of his ship, his golden eyes taking in the assembled Zephyrians with calm interest. He was even more impressive in the confined space of the docking bay. His presence seemed to fill the entire area with quiet power. What is that thing? One of the security officers whispered. He's not a thing, Marcus said firmly. His name is Titan, and he's the last survivor of the race that built the city on that planet. Captain Jelkes had recovered some of her composure, though her skin was still pale. Impossible. Our scan showed no life signs on that planet. Your scans missed a lot of things, Marcus replied, including the fact that this entire race was more advanced than anything you've ever seen. To demonstrate his point, Titan reached out and touched one of the docking bay's control panels. Immediately, the lights grew brighter and the air circulation improved. Systems that had been running inefficiently for years suddenly began, working better than they ever had. The Zephyrians watched in stunned silence as Titan casually improved their technology with a simple touch. Incredible, Commander Vextar breathed. The applications for our research would be unlimited. The way he said it made Marcus's blood run cold. He could see the greed in the Zephyrians' eyes, the way they were already thinking about how to use Titan for their own benefit. He's not here for your research, Marcus said quickly. He's here because I asked him to come. Captain Jelkes's eyes narrowed. You asked him? A primitive human giving orders to a being of such obvious power? I think not. She gestured to her security team. Secure the creature. Take it to the research labs for study. As for the human, place him in detention for stealing an alien vessel and violating first contact protocols. The security team raised their weapons again, this time pointing them at both Marcus and Titan. But before they could fire, something extraordinary happened. Titan simply looked at their weapons and they stopped working, not broken or destroyed. They just became inert pieces of metal and crystal. The Zephyrians pulled their triggers, but nothing happened. Then Titan stood up to his full height and spoke for the first time since leaving the planet. His voice was deep and resonant, carrying harmonics that made the metal walls of the docking bay vibrate. He spoke in the Zephyrian language, but his accent was strange, ancient. I am Titan, last of the architects who built the spaces between stars, when your species was still learning to chip stone. The small one beside me showed kindness to one who had lost everything. He is under my protection. Any who would harm him will face the consequences of their actions. The docking bay fell silent except for the humming of the ship's systems. The Zephyrians stared at Titan with expressions of shock and growing fear. They had just realized that they were in the presence of something far older and more powerful than they had ever imagined, and that something was protective of the human they had tried to kill. The silence in the docking bay stretched on for what felt like forever. Captain Jelkes stood frozen, her crystalline features cycling through different shades of blue as she tried to process what Titan had just said. The security team looked at their useless weapons with growing panic. Commander Vextar was the first to recover. His voice shook slightly as he spoke. "You claim to be an architect. The architects are a myth, a legend from the early days of galactic civilization." Titan's golden eyes fixed on the commander, and when he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of ages. "Your people learned to travel between stars using engines based on architect designs. The hyperspace lanes you use were mapped by my people 10,000 years ago. The energy shields that protect your ships are crude copies of architect technology. We are no myth." To prove his point, Titan reached out and touched the wall of the docking bay. Immediately, lines of golden light spread from his fingers, racing along the metal surfaces. Every system in the bay began working better than it ever had. The air became cleaner, the gravity more stable, the lights brighter but somehow easier on the eyes. Marcus watched the Zephyrians' faces as they realized that their entire civilization was built on the foundations left behind by Titan's people. Their expressions shifted from fear to awe to a kind of hungry greed that made Marcus's stomach turn. "The research applications," Vextar whispered. "The technological advances we could make. Captain, we must secure this being for study. Think of what we could learn." "I already told you," Marcus said, stepping protectively in front of Titan despite the absurdity of a human trying to shield a being the size of a small building. "He's not here for your research. He's my friend." Captain Jelkes laughed, a sound like breaking crystal. "Friend? A human befriending an architect? The very idea is ridiculous. You are nothing but a maintenance worker, a tool to be used and discarded. You have no right to speak for such a being." The contempt in her voice was clear, but it was nothing Marcus hadn't heard before. What surprised him was Titan's reaction. The architect's anger hit the room like a physical force, making the lights flicker and causing several Zephyrians to stagger. "You dare speak so of one who showed mercy to the lost?" Titan's voice boomed through the bay. "This human found me alone and afraid, the last of my kind in a dead city. He could have run, could have left me to my grief. Instead, he stayed. He shared his food, his warmth, his companionship with a being he had never seen before." Titan moved forward, and the Zephyrians scrambled to get out of his way. "Your species sent him to die because you thought him worthless. Yet he survived where your superior beings would have perished in minutes. He showed courage where you showed cowardice, compassion where you showed cruelty." The captain tried to regain control of the situation. "That may be, but this ship belongs to the Convergence by right of salvage. You will surrender it to us along with any other architect technology you possess." Marcus felt Titan's amusement through their connection before the architect spoke again. "Salvage? The ship was not abandoned. It was waiting. And as for surrendering anything to you?" Titan paused, looking around at the assembled Zephyrians with something that might have been pity. "Perhaps you should consider your position more carefully." With casual ease, Titan reached out and touched the nearest computer terminal. Instantly, every screen in the docking bay lit up with information that made the Zephyrians gasp in shock. The displays showed the location and status of every architect installation in the galaxy. Ancient space stations that the modern races had thought were natural phenomena. Derelict ships that contained technology beyond current understanding. Entire solar systems that had been modified by architect engineering. All of them were now responding to Titan's presence, awakening after millennia of sleep. "You see," Titan said conversationally, "when the last of the architects awakens, our technology awakens with him. Across the galaxy, systems that have been dormant for thousands of years are coming online. Ships that your people could never hope to build are beginning to stir. And all of them recognize my authority." The implications hit the Zephyrians like a physical blow. Every major spacefaring civilization in the galaxy used roots and technologies that had architect origins. If those systems could be controlled or shut down by Titan, the entire galactic economy would collapse overnight. Commander Vextar's voice was barely a whisper. "What do you want?" Titan looked at Marcus, and through their connection, Marcus felt his friend's question. This was the moment when everything would change. What did they want from this situation? Marcus thought about his years of being treated as less than nothing by the Zephyrians. He thought about all the other humans working in menial jobs throughout the galaxy, looked down upon by species that considered themselves superior. He thought about the loneliness he had felt until he met Titan, and the loneliness that Titan had endured for thousands of years. We want things to change, Marcus said finally. We want species to stop thinking they're better than others just because they have bigger ships or more advanced weapons. We want respect, not just for humans, but for everyone who gets pushed around by bullies like you. Titan nodded approvingly. My young friend speaks wisdom. For too long, power in this galaxy has been held by those who take rather than those who give. The architects believed in building, in creating, in helping others reach their potential. Perhaps it is time for those ideals to return. Captain Gelkes tried one last desperate gambit. The Galactic Council will never accept this. They will band together to stop you. Will they? Titan asked. He touched the computer terminal again, and the screens now showed news feeds from across the galaxy. The story was already spreading. The last architect had awakened, befriended by a human who had shown him kindness. Some species were afraid, but others were hopeful. Races that had been oppressed by the stronger civilizations saw this as a chance for change. Besides, Titan continued, I have no intention of conquering anyone. I am a teacher, not a warrior. I will share architect knowledge with those who prove they can use it wisely and compassionately. And I will begin with my friend Marcus, who has already shown he possesses both qualities. Over the following weeks, word of Marcus and Titan spread throughout the galaxy. The human who had befriended an architect became a symbol of hope for oppressed species everywhere. Marcus found himself appointed as the first human ambassador to the Architect Restoration Project, a new organization dedicated to bringing architect ideals back to galactic civilization. The Zephyrians, faced with the possibility of being cut off from all architect-derived technology, were forced to change their attitudes dramatically. They began treating their human workers as equals rather than servants. Other species followed suit, afraid of being left behind as Titan began teaching advanced technologies to those who embraced cooperation over domination. Marcus stood on the bridge of their new ship, larger than the first one, designed to carry diplomatic teams between worlds. Through the observation windows, he could see 3 different species working together to build a new space station using architect principles. Titan was in the ship's teaching bay, sharing knowledge with a group of young beings from a dozen different worlds. Marcus smiled as he watched his friend work. Titan had found his purpose again, not as the last of his kind, but as the teacher who would ensure that architect ideals lived on in others. You know, Marcus said through their connection, the Zephyrians were right about one thing. Their faces when we came back were definitely worth treasure. Titan's amusement rippled through their bond. Indeed, though I believe the real treasure was the friendship we discovered along the way. Marcus laughed. Even an ancient architect could be corny sometimes. But as he looked out at the galaxy that was slowly learning to value kindness over strength, he had to admit that Titan was absolutely right. The human they had sent to die had returned with something more valuable than any technology or weapon. He had returned with hope, and that was changing everything.